television show CSI portrays crime scene investigators going to the scenes of violent, brutal, and oftentimes bloody crimes. The show portrays the identification and collection of evidence in a crime scene is taking a matter of a couple of hours, and then the processing and identification of a suspect taking another couple of hours, occasionally a day. This portrayal could be nothing further than the truth. In reality, the identification and collection of evidence at a crime scene takes, at the minimum, several hours, and at the maximum up to several days. The processing of the evidence and identification of a suspect could take weeks, if not months, if relying solely on the evidence. The real purpose of CSI, what they really do, is partially portrayed in the television series. CSI in the real world collects and then processes evidence gathered at a crime scene. But instead of working solely on their own, they typically work with detectives who are assigned to the case and identify what would be evidence and what would not be evidence. There are several purposes to evidence, and understanding those purposes helps to understand the real purpose behind CSI, or crime scene investigators. Evidence is used to both solidify prosecution, which means to prove someone guilty, or to exonerate a suspect, or to prove them innocent. As with law enforcement, evidence does the same thing. It's just as often about proving someone is innocent as it is proving them guilty. One of the problems with CSI, the television series, is that it does not portray the amount of time involved with processing evidence. As I've already stated, the collection process is at least a day, if not more. And the evaluation process, the examining the evidence and then using that evidence to identify a suspect, sometimes can take days, months, several years. In fact, in many cases, it can take up to 20 or 30 years if a suspect is ever identified from that evidence. More often than not, the suspect is established by the detectives who, through a series of interviews and interrogations, both with the witness and victim and with an eventual suspect once one is identified, they are the ones who really establish precisely what happened during a crime, as far as who did what, who was the victim, was the suspect in actuality the victim, was the victim the suspect. The detectives and the patrol officers are the people who establish the arrest. They're the one who builds the case. Unlike in CSI, where the portrayal is that the crime scene investigators are the one who establish a suspect and then interrogate them. Once again, couldn't be further from the truth. The detectives and the patrol officers are the ones with the contacts with the victims, with the contacts with witnesses and potential suspects. They are the one who make the arrest and initiate prosecution. Evidence does serve a very important purpose in criminal proceedings, though. As I said, the evidence can either exonerate a suspect or prove their guilt. Many times, crime scene investigators and laboratory technicians are called in to testify to court on the case that they help to investigate, and that's another distinction. In the television series, the investigators, more often than not, are also performing the tests on the evidence that is gathered. Again, in some cases that may be true. In most cases, however, the collecting agency has to send their evidence to another laboratory. Some use a major metropolitan laboratory, whatever laboratory may be in the area. Others use a state laboratory ran by the state police or state highway patrol. Others choose to send theirs to either the federal government or to a private company who also does DNA testing, trace evidence like hair and fiber, or fingerprint testing. The one exception to the time frame would be the fingerprints. Most fingerprints can be identified within a matter of just a few hours through either a Metropolitan Police Department's crime lab or through a state and/or federal crime lab. CSI, the television show, is entertainment. It's entertaining, and while it may portray some aspects of crime scene investigation, it by no means is accurate, both in the time estimation and in the results that are gained. Evidence is not a nail in the coffin. It is one piece of the puzzle used in conjunction with the detectives and patrol officers' investigation, and is used hand in hand to secure the sense of justice that the victim of a crime looks for. Without either one, the other would be useless. The only time that the only thing that could ever be a real nail in the coffin is a suspect's confession, and even that is subjective to the court's scrutiny.